Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we're going to be talking about 5 league-winning running backs for the remainder of this fantasy football season. These are players that we're not going to pay too much attention to the price that we have to offer to get these assets on our teams, or what the production for this player was in the past week. We've done stock market watches, buy low players, all that great stuff. But today we are solely focused on players who, if you have the opportunity or the capability of just going out and acquiring for your teams, or if you so happen to already have these players in your lineups, you want these players around and you want to stick with them for the long haul this year. These players have awesome upside. They flash some really impressive potential here, and I am all over their fantasy value here going forward for the 2021 season. So if you're new around here to the SFS channel, make sure to click that subscribe button and turn the bell on. We're approaching 3K subs here, and we're trying to grow this community like wildfire. Drop your comments down in the comment section below if you've got any questions for me about trades in your leagues, and let's hit that intro and get straight in to today's episode. Alrighty, here we go. So as we mentioned, we're not going to be paying too much attention to trade price for these players in today's episodes, but these are players that need to be made a priority to acquire or to continue owning for your fantasy leagues throughout the rest of the season. James Robinson, the last month of the year, has completely changed my perspective of how he can produce and the ways that he can be used in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. The first 2 weeks of the season was a very bumpy road. His numbers were very down, and I was beginning to question whether or not Urban Meyer was going to be able to use him effectively and in the role that he was giving us awesome production from in his rookie season. And now he's completely turned that around. This run game has picked up where it left off and even progressed from that 2020 season. And James Robinson looks like he's added another gear to his fantasy producing capabilities and just overall who he is as a player. This guy runs hard each and every snap. He had some of the most impressive 2 and 3 yard runs against the Dolphins on that early morning London football game. I guess it depends where you were watching from. But against the Dolphins, he was very impressive. He played physical football, ran the ball hard, found the end zone yet again. And he's seen 19 or more touches in each game over the last 4 weeks. He's got 16.5 fantasy points or more in each of those performances as well. He's been a player that has just come out here and hit that RB1 number and scoring ceiling on the head each and every single week. Now, he's still kind of compensating and making up from those first 2 games, so his overall season total of points isn't as high as some other players out there. But going forward, this Jags team needs to continue running the football. They understand that. Urban Meyer wants to have a very balanced attack here going forward the rest of this season. In the late season schedule for James Robinson, if he continues to be used with the high touch counts and the workhorse numbers that he's getting right now, he's got Houston, the Jets, and New England, the final 3 weeks of your traditional fantasy playoffs. So that's something I'm going to be referencing a lot throughout today's episode. The traditional fantasy playoffs are going to be the 3 weeks of the final 4, the first 3 weeks of the final 4. So week 18 this year, since we have that extra game this season, is usually not something that a lot of leagues will have as their championship, because you'll have the bye week teams if there's someone who has clearly set themselves above the bar. Now, that might not be something that we see this season or even in the future be as much of a prominent force as it has been in the past, where we've got teams resting players because only the number 1 overall seed gets bye weeks now. But typically fantasy seasons and fantasy leagues will cut their year short by 1 week of the actual NFL regular season in an attempt to try and create the most even playing field as possible, with all of every team's best players still out there and obviously producing, because they're, again, you don't want to have, per se, in years past, you end your league in week 17, which was obviously back with the 16-game schedule, and the Chiefs are resting Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and you're left without some of your best players potentially. So James Robinson in weeks 14 through 17, again, Houston, the Jets, and New England, all matchups he can produce against. That New England matchup is the most formidable of the bunch, but not something that concerns me overly that much, because, again, the touch count has been great. I think that Jacksonville is continuing, that he just picked up their first win. They're progressing forward. They're continuing to get better. This is a team that's not going to be anywhere near playoff contention, but if they just keep taking small steps forward as an organization, they're going to find ways to be able to continue running the ball with success and getting who is quite possibly their most reliable offensive player lots of touches each and every single game. How about Leonard Fournette? Right now, the stock on Leonard Fournette is way up, so his trade price might be a little bit more tough to acquire here. But man, if there was a running back who is being used in ways that you love to see for fantasy purposes, playoff Lenny's getting the job done here in the regular season. 16 touches or more in each of the last 3 weeks. He is pulling ahead of Ronald Jones and separating himself more and more with each passing game between who is the true lead back in this Tampa Bay offense. There's no question anymore. It is Leonard Fournette. This is the best football we've seen him play, honestly, to this point in his NFL career. You've got one of the most dangerous offenses in the National Football League with a passing game that's so lethal. Teams, their last worry is probably what Leonard Fournette is doing out of the backfield. Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and when Rob Gronkowski comes back, there's so much going on with Tom Brady under center that they can't stack the box. They can't give this team legitimate looks against the run because they're so concerned with trying to stop them from getting fried over the top with one of those players who could be a number one receiver on any given team in this league. So Leonard Fournette is in an absolute goldmine of a situation just offensively. He's got a good offensive line. He's used as that hammer on the goal line who's going to just punch in touchdowns and score in that area of the field for you. And he's catching passes. Giovanni Bernard is the James White player, if you want to give him that term and that role, based off of the comparisons between the offense run in New England under Tom Brady and now in Tampa Bay. But Leonard Fournette's coming in here and he's getting his workload in the passing game as well. He's being used that way. He's producing in that way. He's got 30 targets on this season, which through 6 games paces him out to about 5 targets a game, which is a very impressive marker to be at for, again, a player we think of more as a power back. So Leonard Fournette, buy into him as a high upside RB2 for the rest of this season. I think he's got all the makings for fantasy success down the stretch this season. And when you talk about New Orleans, Carolina, the Jets, and those final 3 games, you're starting out a little bit tough with New Orleans in that Week 14 matchup. But those last 2 games, Carolina and the Jets, I think he can produce very well against those 2 teams, and especially the Jets in championship week. Leonard Fournette could potentially be a difference maker if the Bucs are able to run that one out and just run the football late in that contest. DeAndre Swift. This is an interesting one for me because looking at DeAndre Swift's raw yardage output as a rusher, it's nothing to be overly impressed with, and it's actually quite underwhelming. He's only rushed for more than 50 yards once this season, and that rushing total was 51 yards. Where he gets his value from, where he finds his fantasy football success, is ironically in garbage time. And in some situations, it's late in the game when Detroit's lost some of these close games, these nail-biters to these long field goals. He's out there catching passes late, finding room in the flats, and getting checkdowns from Jared Goff. Or, he's got obviously his design screen passes, his swing routes, all that good stuff that he finds production with. But it's the receiving game, which is where he gets the job done here. DeAndre Swift's also got a touchdown in 4 out of his 6 weeks here, and he's just finding ways to produce in spite of a bad game script. They just lost an ugly game to the Bengals, but lo and behold, Swift found a way to produce here, find the end zone, be used as a receiving threat late in this game. The numbers were down all game long, but come that 4th quarter, he clicks in, this passing game picks up, and DeAndre Swift figures out how to get to the point. If he doesn't get from point A to point B in the traditional running back spectrum here, but he is a player who finds a way to get to point B in his own unique way here. So a player I trust, especially in PPR leagues going down the stretch here. He's probably not quite in solidified RB1 territory at this point in the year. He has, again, those risks with game script, and he's probably not going to give you too many awesome rushing performances, but that's not why we like him in the first place. The pass-catching volume and that side of things is why we think DeAndre Swift can be a high upside play week over week. And obviously the explosive capabilities he has in the open field. And if he can make a defender miss, he can make a big run-after-catch scenario occur. So DeAndre Swift, again, another player I'm trusting here. And I think down the stretch, as long as he stays healthy, could be a good asset to buy for here in Week 7. Austin Ekeler. Now, this is a similar situation, a player that I like for a lot of the same reasons as a DeAndre Swift. I'm not going to call him a buy low just after one down performance against the Baltimore Ravens. That was an embarrassing game for the Chargers. They got absolutely blown off the field, lost by 28 points. It was 34-6. The Ravens were the better football team for 4 entire quarters. Austin Ekeler had a mere 6 rushing attempts for 7 yards, and the receiving work that he got just wasn't enough to make up for the difference here. But one game doesn't scare me off. One bad performance isn't going to keep me from going out and targeting Austin Ekeler. This is a player that I have in the upper echelon of my fantasy football running backs down the stretch of this season now. If Christian McCaffrey's healthy, Dalvin Cook's back to full strength, Derrick Henry, he's not quite up in that tier 1A of players, but he's right below that group. This is a player who is uber dynamic. I called him mini CMC throughout the entirety of the offseason this year. And through the first 5 weeks, he absolutely lived up to that. He had 11 or more fantasy points in every game to that point in the season. He was catching passes left and right, being a super dynamically used player. He's heading into a bye week here in week 7. I think the Chargers can take this as a deep breath, collect themselves, gather whatever it is they need to do going forward to be productive, be a productive offense and just overall team for the duration of this season, and get back on track then in week 8 and moving forward there. So he's got Kansas City, Houston, and Denver as those final 3 contests, and those are games that he should be able to produce very well against. He's already shown us against Kansas City that he can be a productive player in that matchup. Houston is just a team that you seem to be able to run or pass on. Jonathan Taylor just had a really big game against them on the ground here in week 6. And we've seen other players do that as well. And obviously, Austin Ekeler being so dynamic, he's going to have no issues getting involved in that phase of things. And then the Denver Broncos started out the season really hot through the first 3 weeks, but sort of have been eroding here despite the fact that the Raiders transitioned to an interim head coach here in week 6. 34 points were hung on the Denver defense, which we all thought was going to be one of the top units in the league here after that first month of the season. And then David Montgomery. This is a player I'm going to keep talking about here. Khalil Herbert did an excellent job filling in and picking up the slack in week 6. But David Montgomery is an upper echelon running back too in fantasy football who can give you fringe RB1 numbers on a week-to-week basis because of his dynamic involvement, because of his 3-down skill set, his ability to be a goal line back for the Chicago offense. They're still trying to get Justin Fields acclimated to things. They're still working on developing that passing game. But the one thing this Bears team does well is they consistently find ways to run the football almost each and every single week. And with a player of David Montgomery's caliber, when he comes back healthy here, this is potentially the easiest buy you're going to have on this list. If your fantasy record is already in a very favorable space heading into week 7 here, you can potentially buy Montgomery from a desperate team who needs production to fill in for David's absence in their lineup and get some really nice return later in the year when you're looking for strong RB2 caliber play. So Montgomery, a player I trust a lot here. Minnesota, Seattle, and the Giants are his fantasy playoff matchups. Seattle is one of the worst rushing defensive units in the league. You can run on the Vikings this season, and the Giants have been absolutely gashed. Darrell Henderson went off against them here in week 6. And overall, Montgomery being a dynamic player, like most of these threats are on this week or this league-winning episode list here, that's clearly a similarity and a trait that I like to see in my running backs is that pass-catching involvement and that receiving work. That's something Montgomery has going for him as well. Alrighty, those are my 5 league-winning trade targets for Week 7 fantasy football at the running back position. Again, let me know your individual trade scenarios in your leagues down in the comment section below. And throughout the week, I'll get back to as many of you as I can to help you out and determine which side of that deal I would rather be on. So thank you all so much for watching. Again, go check out some of the other episodes I've posted for fantasy advice here in Week 7. And I'll see you guys there. Peace out.